You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Israel and Iran continue to trade missile and drone attacks as the war stretches into its fifth day. This conflict started on Friday with Israeli airstrikes that targeted top military commanders and nuclear facilities in Iran. Just a few hours ago, President Trump posted a call on his social media platform for, quote, unconditional surrender from Iran and called Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, an easy target. Yesterday, Trump urged residents to immediately evacuate Tehran, a city of almost 10 million people. Israel's military had earlier issued an evacuation order for much of northeastern Tehran. Here in the Seattle area, members of the Iranian diaspora are experiencing a familiar anxiety, trying to keep tabs on friends and family during a bloody conflict. We reached out to hear some of their stories.
Hi, my name is Faraz. I'm a local DJ and music producer here in Seattle.
My name is Daria Sarivar. I'm state representative from the 46th Legislative District. I am the first and only Iranian and Middle Eastern person in the state legislature.
My name is Arya Fani. I'm faculty in Middle Eastern languages and cultures at the University of Washington, Seattle.
My name is Omid Rustai. I am a local author in Seattle, as well as a culinary instructor and a psychotherapist.
Some were born in the United States. Others emigrated from Iran for various reasons, like fleeing conditions after the revolution or looking for opportunities for higher education. Everyone still has family members there. For years, they've watched and read the news as world events have impacted their loved ones back home. There have been protests, nuclear deals made and broken, isolating sanctions, and battles waged around the region. The Iranian Americans we spoke with say following the news is difficult because of internet connectivity issues and the emotional toll of watching casualties mount.
So we're all glued to our televisions, to our radios, to our news, to our social media, and it is always a slippery slope for most of us because you can really truly lose yourself into such level of chaos and distress.
I truly have been sick to my stomach with anxiety for Iranians and for my community, because it's not just about the active bombings that are happening in Iran. It's also about how the American people and how our federal administration are going to react to Iranian Americans who are here as well.
There's this level of anxiety that I have when I search, and then when the results pop up, I'm kind of like, okay, like how bad is this going to be? Because I'm expecting it to get worse and worse, and then I see the news and go, okay, yeah, it's bad, and it's getting worse.
For Iranians inside the country and around the world, there are different views of the current conflict and what might come. Some have expressed optimism that Israel's assault could mean an end to an oppressive and corrupt regime. Among members of the Seattle area Iranian diaspora we spoke with directly, though, there was only apprehension about what's going on.
When we ask Iranians, not Iranian Americans, like Iranians, what they want peace and they want freedom. And instead of that, they continue to be oppressed, they continue to be beaten and hurt by their own government, bombed by Israelis, and then vilified by the West. And it is so difficult to hear folks that think that somehow these bombs are going to liberate Iran. That could not be further from the truth. Every time a government has meddled in Iran, their leader has been replaced with someone who is more violent and more oppressive. That liberation has to come from within, has to come from the people.
And I'm not saying that Iran's a good government. It's an awful, oppressive government. But that's not the story. The story here is Israel acting with recklessness and impunity. And the United States is the only country that can stop it. And so because I feel hopeless and helpless, the only way I can keep sane is to plan leaving the U.S. and never looking back.
A lot of us are sitting in such heightened stress and anxiety because of its unpredictability and its expansion. And what most of us are sitting and thinking is, so what is the end game? To what end? It is, I speak for myself, I know there are a lot of different opinions and ideologies as to what should come next. But I say no war, no bombs, no invasions. Let Iranians choose the freedom, choose their own destiny, have the freedom to choose their own destiny without foreign intervention and or causing yet another war.
They dream of a day when they can safely visit Iran again. We asked them what they would do first.
I have never returned home. So I left Iran 40 plus years ago. And so for me, it is reacquainting myself with the family, many of the families that I've obviously not seen for 45 years, but also the next generation that has come into the picture. And the experiences, Iranians are very, very affectionate. So I will be hugged and kissed and embraced for having been gone for so long and perhaps very immediately taken to a home with the ritual of serving tea and pastry and engaged in this really deep, meaningful conversation about our well-beings and what we have been up to for so long that we have not been sitting together, celebrating family and connection and community.
So if I were to be able to go back to Iran and things, were safe and there was a lot more freedom, and it would be a lot more of a celebratory, just having fun, soaking in the partying, the love, the happiness, the dancing with family and friends and just people who just want to have a good time and live a good life.
I want to walk towards my high school and just lose myself in the hubbub of daily life, go to this ice cream place behind a museum that has incredible saffron ice cream with frozen chunks of whipped cream in it, and they serve it with carrot juice, which may seem gross, but somehow that combination works. Just look at the pink hue of the mountains. My city, Shiraz in the south, is just unbelievably beautiful. And I wish I could go, but I don't trust that regime. I don't trust that I'll be able to return to my family safely.
Thanks to Omid Rustai, otherwise known as the Caspian Chef, Washington State Representative Daria Farivar, Arya Fani, Director of the Persian and Iranian Studies Program at the University of Washington, and Faraz Zargami, also known as DJ Dancing Faraz. Turning now from personal stories of Iranian Americans to the strategic calculations of the U.S. and Iran at this moment. This morning, I spoke with Alex Vatanka. He's a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, and his latest book is called The Battle of the Ayatollahs, U.S. Foreign Policy and Political Rivalry Since 1989. Alex, thanks for being back on Soundside. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me.
So we just heard from a few members of Seattle's Iranian community, and one of the things that the chef, Omid Rustai, said really sticks with me, and it's that a lot of the anxiety that the Iranian diaspora is feeling is fueled by questions about what is the end game here for Israel. Has Israel communicated the scope of its operation?
No, it's a very legitimate concern. I mean, we are now 4 days into this conflict, and we've gone from basically the justification for the strikes on Iran on the part of Israel being that, the nuclear program of Iran is a threat by Israel, has to stop. We kind of assume, most of the analysts, I think, assume that it was, aimed essentially at giving Iran something to think about, but then quickly resumed diplomatic talk with the United States. And that was pretty much what President Trump was saying, that, hey, Iran, I gave you a good deal. You didn't take it. Now, next time you come back, take me seriously. That's where we were. But now we're 4 days into this. Sort of the last 2 days, the message from Israel and increasingly from the United States is shifting. It's no longer just about the nuclear program. It seems it's more about the nature of the regime. So nobody's kind of come out very explicitly said this regime has to go. Netanyahu has hinted at it very strongly. But we're still basically going in that direction. It looks like the last I heard from President Trump, talking about the supreme leader in Iran, we know where you're hiding. We can get you, maybe not yet, but we'll get you. That's the sort of language that suggests that the mission now is about a political change in Iran, which means the United States is likely entering the war. And then we all have to sit back and hope for the best, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, Trump has demanded unconditional surrender in all caps on his Truth Social post, saying, I know exactly where Iran's so-called supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is hiding, saying that he would be an easy target. So this says to you that this has gone beyond demanding some kind of nuclear deal or trying to use this as a wedge to destroy the nuclear program. This is about regime change?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are so many surprises here. I don't know what's happened in the last few days. When you look at the president's track record on Iran, he has always been very clear. He's not in the business of regime change. He said it's bad for the United States. Americans die. There's no good return in that investment. And then suddenly he has, in the course of literally a couple of days, moved in the direction of not just entering a war, but entering a war with a large country of 90 million, and it's bigger, I mean, 3 times the size of Iraq. So again, that's a big question mark. Is this thought through? Is Israel kind of dragging the president along? Or was the president kind of convinced that, look, if we get regime change in Iran, the future of the Middle East will change for the better? You could make that argument. We can debate whether what Israel did against Iran by attacking it was justified or not. Put that aside. I think very few people would argue against the fact that this Iranian regime is hugely unpopular with its own people and probably a majority of people in the region. So its departure will not exactly be missed. The question is at what cost? What kind of a war? Because if they think regime change is what the United States is after, at that point they're going to try and throw everything they have at everybody in the region. So the conflict will go from being one of Israel and Iran hitting one another to potentially expanding to other countries in the region. And certainly the United States will be sucked into something that it hasn't been engaged in since, well, for at least a number of years now.
Because there's no off-ramp then if you're part of the regime, if you're connected to the regime, which so many parts of Iranian society are, from the banking system, on down. I can't really fathom the new rhetoric from President Trump and square it with his campaign promises of America First and what seemed like promising no more forever wars, isolationism. Do we know, Alex, this lead up to the initial strike by Israel happened just a couple of days before a sixth round of nuclear talks was supposed to happen between Iran and the U.S. And President Trump did seem very invested in getting to a new deal. Why now? I mean, is there any credence to this idea that the U.S. was in on it and trying to distract Iran and have them let their guard down? Was there any real movement by Iran towards a nuclear weapon that made this an urgent, if not now, when, for Israel to attack? I mean, why did they launch this attack now? Do you have any handle on that, Alex?
Right. So look, I haven't seen any reports that I'm confident will sort of tell me that Iran was about to go down the path of weaponization in the short term. That was certainly not something that we were picking up. So the timing was more of, broadly speaking, in the last year or so, because Iran has lost so many of its so-called proxy friends in the region, and it's always been very unpopular with the Iranian people, the argument was being made that this regime is weak. The time is ripe. They shouldn't even have the opportunity to weaponize their program, because if they did weaponize, then essentially they become untouchables. That becomes their key deterrence. So time wasn't on the side of certainly Israel. So they acted. From what we've heard the president say, President Trump knew beforehand this attack was happening. What we don't know is what the Israelis sort of sold the attack as. Was it sold as, Mr. Trump, we will attack various Iranian sites, guaranteeing you that they will come back and give you the kind of deal you wanted? Or was President Trump and the Israelis from the get-go in the same place, in the sense that saying, we will pretend that diplomacy is still an option, but really let's go for regime change? I don't have an answer for that. But let me also point out, the Iranian regime made a couple of big strategic mistakes. One was, they didn't negotiate directly with the United States. They could have done that. They could have sent somebody to Washington or accepted Stephen Witkoff, who had said he would go to Tehran. The Iranians were more worried about the optics at that point, which turned out to be a mistake. They should have engaged in direct negotiations. And number two, for the life of me, I don't understand, other than that just sense of national pride that we have to have a right to enrich uranium. That could have been an issue that Iran could have had that right on paper, but in practice could have suspended it for a number of years, simply to give President Trump something he could take back to his base and say, I got a better deal than Obama in 2015 and I avoided a war. So Iran did, I think to some extent, is definitely guilty of having mishandled the situation. But here we are, and the question is, what is the end game? Is there still a chance for diplomacy? As of right now, I would tell you, I think the Iranians would take a diplomatic way out. If the Israelis stop striking at them, they have said they will strike at Israel. But, again, going back to Bibi Netanyahu, he has a long history of wanting regime change going back to the 1990s. He will say, as long as this regime is in power, Israel cannot feel safe, and therefore the regime has to go. That's basically his key argument. The question is, how much of international support can Netanyahu essentially bring with him in that endeavor as he's moving forward in his Iran mission?
Is it fair to be feeling a lot of deja vu from 2003 and Iraq and the talk of regime change and the talk of what could be achieved by military force, but then seeing the realities of how things devolve and the damaging things that can come out of that? I mean, it just feels like our memories are so short, Alex. I mean, is it okay that I'm just feeling like this is a repeat of what's been going on in the Middle East for decades?
Right. So, yeah, I mean, look, I think if I could just put myself in the shoes of the Iranians right now, I think vast majority, as I said before, do not like this regime, blame this regime for where Iran is today. This whole fight with Israel is a fight that they chose to have as a regime, because as a people, as a country, this was not a necessary fight. There is no history of animosity between Iran and Israel. There is no land conflict, nothing like of that nature. So this is a war of choice, essentially. Certainly, that's been my argument. But here we are. Now, if you're an average Iranian and suddenly bombs stop dropping on your head, at that point, the big question mark, if you're Israel, if you're the United States, is what happens to that public sentiment in Iran? That is, by and large, anti-regime. But if they're all dying alongside one another, it doesn't matter if you're anti-regime or not.
And is there a credible opposition? There is none in country. And the conversation that's being had about the Shah's son, things like that, I mean, these seem like really pipe dreams. Like, how can a credible opposition be in place to put together a stable government at this point after years of an oppressive regime and then, of course, bombs falling from the sky right now?
Right. No, there is no doubt in my mind that the energy, the anti-regime energy that exists in Iran, if kind of handled carefully and with wisdom, can turn into something that looks like an opposition in waiting or an alternative government to the Islamic Republic. We shouldn't forget that Ali Khamenei is 86 years old. He was going to leave the scene anyway, eventually. So the question now is, can Iranians inside the regime in Iran, plus members of opposition in diaspora, can they get themselves together to put some of their petty differences aside and look beyond Ali Khamenei and then reach out to whoever they have to reach out to, obviously in this case, United States and Israel, and say, some of your concerns will be dealt with, but let's not devastate the country of Iran. Let's not go to the point where you end up in a civil war. This is a country of 90 million people. If Iran starts burning, at least members of this regime will make sure they will drag as many with them as possible. So you can imagine the situation of this conflict, as I said, spilling over U.S. bases, U.S. interest, commercial interest. There are billions and trillions of dollars of American interest in the broader Middle East. So much at stake. So, you're absolutely right in making a comparison to 2003. But we have to hope we don't go there. Certainly, I don't think that's what President Trump has sort of signed up for, the idea of boots on the ground. He's probably under the, thinking that this can be done from above. The regime will collapse. The Iranian people rise up. There will be democracy, freedom, and everybody will live happily ever after. But that's, as you just pointed out, there's a lot of hopeful thinking there. But it can be managed. It can perhaps be managed, and you might avoid the worst, certainly the sort of things that we saw in Iraq some 20 years ago.
What kind of signals, just before we go here, Alex, will you be watching for important inflection points in which direction this conflict goes?
The most important thing is, and we're sort of getting close to that, is this conflict about Iran's nuclear program, its missiles, its regional policies, all of which arguably the regime, what's left of it, could decide to sort of change, adjust to the liking of the United States and Israel? Or is it too late for that? That there is no trust. This regime, as it is, every one of them, they need to go. And when we're talking about regime change being the policy that's clear for what's left of the Iranian regime, as I said, it's difficult to say why they would then compromise. Many of them presumably will stay back and fight to the very end. Big question mark of how much fighting they can do. Let's not forget, they have United States and Israel increasingly as external sort of enemies, but they have an even bigger enemy in Iran. That's called Iranian public opinion that blames Khamenei and the Revolutionary Guards for where Iran is today.
Alex Vatanka is a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute. Alex, at the start of this conversation, we talked to members of Seattle's Iranian American community, the Iranian diaspora in our region, about the anxiety they're feeling, trying to keep in touch with their loved ones and family members in Iran. You were born there. You haven't lived there in a long time. I assume you have loved ones or family there. I mean, how are you personally doing, just quickly before we go, with trying to keep track of everything and thinking of, the safety of your people?
Sure. Look, I have to now take my analyst hat off and just be me, Alex Vatanka, the person.
Just Alex.
Hello. Yeah. Look, I'm one of those millions of Iranians who had to leave because of the policies of the Islamic Republic. There are millions of us because this is a very nasty regime. I can't, underscore that enough. It has done horrible things to the Iranian people for the 46 years it's been in power. Nobody's going to miss the Islamic Republic, but there is this fear: what if things go south? What if we end up in a civil war or something worse? And people start, dying in large numbers. So there is that fear. And I had never thought I would, we will come close to this, that I would not be an analyst, but actually watch potentially family members getting in harm's way. But here we are, and hopefully it won't be as bad as some of us fear right now.
Thank you, Alex. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
That's Alex Vatanka with the Middle East Institute. And again, thanks to the members of the Iranian community in Seattle who answered our calls over the past 12 hours to talk about what they're going through. Thanks for listening to Soundside. This show is only possible because listeners support us. If you're able to give right now, please check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.